There we go. Hello, everybody. It is Friday and 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and you know what that means. It is time for TGI, the greatest indoor reading series, which has been in operation with the exception of last week and one other week where we were really tired in like May, since March of 2020. Um, I feel like I should say to everybody right now, welcome to 2021. I am in a sense, it's just a day, but in another sense, isn't it great to feel a little further away from, a year that was really, really hard for a lot of people? And, some of that difficulty, some of that, particularly around coronavirus, led to this show, um, created by Trina. I call her my better third because of it's a size joke, but better half. Hosted by myself and now booked by our friend Noli Reed. We have been here pretty much every week hearing 4 or 5 writers or artists present and discuss their work, weekly since March. We were trying to figure out how many people have been on the show the other day, and it's something like 170, I think, which is sort of nuts to think about. Anyway, we have a wonderful lineup tonight. I think all I will really say otherwise is that I did want to mention, I unfortunately heard from a friend of mine recently that she lost her father to COVID the other day. And he was a relatively young guy, 61, did have a heart condition, but the real big problem was that he needed to work to make money. So he was delivering food in Jersey City and he got sick. I guess the only reason I really mention that is, it's very easy, especially now, and, being people of relative privilege, particularly, it's sort of easy to like not think about. And it's easy to sort of think there's a light at the end of the tunnel because there's, word of a vaccine and all this stuff. But I guess I just bring it up because 2 reasons. One is it is very important to take this seriously. It is very important to keep yourself safe and other people around you safe as much as you can. And that's why we appreciate you joining us on Zoom for a literature reading instead of, cramming yourself into a bookstore right now, which I'm sure someone's trying to do somewhere in the country. And then the other is just that one of the things about the passage of time is it's inevitable that you realize that things cannot be taken for granted. Life is fairly short. It moves in one direction. As far as we know, there may only be one of it. So I would like to invite everybody to just reach out to your loved ones, tell people they're important, all that good stuff. And I will tell you all, you are all important to us just by being here. Seriously. Basically my entire social life has been TGI since March of 2020. And also, we've made what feel like really legitimate, to be lifelong friends here. And, those connections, those relationships are the most important thing. So with that, in a sort of segue, it also happens to be that those relationships, those connections happen to be pretty good fodder for literature, right? I feel like most people write about human emotions, human experience. That's super vague, but I'm going to call it a segue. So without further... Oh, wait, before I say that, other important thing, if it's your first time here, open up the chat window on the Zoom interface at the bottom. There's like a little speech bubble. People use that to discuss during the show. I love it because people will pick out lines from pieces that they particularly like, things that resonate with them, commentary, things like that. I think that's great. So don't forget to do that. And at the end of the show, I will give you also information to keep in touch with us or follow up on future shows. For now, that is enough foo-for-raw from myself. Our first reader tonight is Alexa Doran. She is currently working on her PhD in poetry at Florida State University. Her full-length collection, DM Me, Mother Darling, won the 2020 May Sarton Poetry Prize and will be published by Bowdler Poetry in spring 2021. She's also the author of the chapbook Night Sink, Faucet Me a Lullaby, Bottle Cap Press 2019, You can look for more work from Doran in recent or upcoming issues of Passages North, Salamander, Literary Mama, The Boiler, and Harvard Review, among others. For a full list of her publications, you can visit her website, which I think Noli will post in the chat at the end of her reading. But for now, Alexa, you can unmute yourself and take us away.
I'm going to attempt to. Yes, thank you, first of all, to Trina, Noli, and Ridge for having me here. And then thank you for anyone that is sharing their first day of 2021 with us. I just feel like we're at an effing precipice right now. So thank you for joining us on this precipice. As Ridge was just mentioning, I have this forthcoming collection coming out, DM Me Mother Darling, and the collection is a mix of poems about my own experience with motherhood and my son Dante, who we were just talking about holiday birthdays. He was born the 22nd of December, so he just turned 5, and also poems from the perspective of Mother Darling from J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. So tonight I'm just going to read poems that are some selections from that forthcoming collection. And I'm going to start in the world of Mother Darling. And with this poem that initially came out in Glass, Mother Darling talks to God. I know what the other mothers think. I feel their umbrellas against my skin, that particular plastic wind they think will skim my conscience. I've already stripped the curtains, nylon to satin, my house a terrarium, the windows a cloak at my throat. Now, cupcake or semen, they see what I'm eating. They watch Father Darling's every stroke. I did not know until now that privacy was a kind of hope. But I don't need a shaft of dust-buttered slats or a velvet stuttered draft. I need a home with the eyelids tacked back and a wall-wide periscope. And those who suggest that this surveillance is a seance do not get that my children aren't dead. No, I don't traffic in magic. My children will fit in the rip left by Jesus when he made that round trip, but forgot to teach us how to rise again from the gulches and beaches. Meet me in the bog behind my house. God, wear whatever you want. Just teach me to see 3 versions of me, like Jesus saw the Trinity, as the air shaved his body into clothes. Okay, then the next poem that I'll share from Mother Darling is Mother Darling Puts Darling Manor on the Market. Dolls rash the room. As I sink in the depression, Wendy last left in the daybed cushion. Like most wounds, this one never goes away, just changes shape. Still, the gesture of her waist is enough to cleave reality, to escape the girth of this nursery. Why the hell didn't Michael call out for me? Wasn't he small enough to seek succor in maternity? Night shreds the shades. Tell me, Wendy, when you slippered out of sight, 2 boys bosom tucked, 2 sons you did not raise, 2 sons I lavendered and scrubbed, did you picture this? My face anything but snow, pink and driven, but nothing, Lord, nothing softly fallen. Guppied, so I must swallow everything. Imagine it, the gill twitch, the ocean shudder of each bubble as it blurs my lips, so much you could never have gauged. Now I want sound to have a taste, to watch you wander its sting and salt glaze, then to serve this scream, raw on my plate. Okay. And then we're gonna leave Mother Darling smoking a spliff. Mother Darling smokes a spliff. The jolt of my gender first, the spurt of its outline firm like the sudden seas of puberty. I swarm to relearn my body, to reinvent the prison plex of my breasts, to vogue below the moon cream of this London alley until I find the me who used to dream in doilies, who hadn't felt the zippered breath of Wendy nest below my flesh. Let me feel the fake green felt of the pool table scrape between my legs, the spilled ale spit along my neck, a pub-sawed man catch in the flurry of my honey and web. Exhale, watch the cherry crest as I smoke out my pre-Wendy self, melon ball all the parts of me still stewing in amniotic scent, and leave me to gorge and gorge what's left. A marsh of tongues I once believed would learn the art of turning air into breeze, but now lie dormant, a wet chorus, waiting to be released. Okay, we're gonna leave Mother Darling waiting to be released. I'm just going to switch over to a couple poems that I have about my personal experience. This one is called Some Call It Bounty. Before you were born, I binge watched Hoarders. The hours ample as the antelope I imagine trampling me whenever I forget to dream. I watched women wear nothing but yellow as they bricked themselves in Barbies, little forts of soulless bodies, loneliness a shade of lip gloss, and a few prize-winning doilies, men who sang separating songs to rats named Adolphus. And then, son, I watched. And I did not love them. I saw their weariness wick and bubble, but did not budge. I had not yet layered that champagne glass with the first chop of your sunshine striated locks, or cut a swath from the cushion where your head sweat once bloomed. Did not understand that barriers could be built by braiding all of your residue. Love is forever a holding on to. So how come they beseech me to let go? No more umbilical cord crust mummified by the bedpost. No more quilt of spit-up rags stitched above the bureau. They don't want to believe. Love is obscene. They want the pink pattern of moderation, lips to ease off lips, breath to exist as a poised pant, the perfect counterpart to the soft parlay of a kiss. But son, I am sloppy with bliss, and I refuse to contain any of it. So let the Florida morning file across your cheeks, turn to me and babble, no words, please, but the moonlight that seeps through the spokes of a bridge, your voice, the uncease of lunar heat. Okay, so I pulled up the random poem. Thank you so much. Let's see if I can find the one I was gonna read. Here it is. Okay, so my last poem that I'll share with y'all is For My Son. It is called For My Son, Who Asks Me to Replay Lizzo's Juice. At 3, you have come to love Lizzo, and finally, my legacy is taking root. At night, when the moon makes a sailboat of us all our decks starlit and scarred, I want to help you feel the thaw, to teach you to self-rescue, using hip-hop, using song. You see, my mom once gifted me Cosmopolitan magazine, and though I did learn first step, pet the perineum, I didn't know sex could be anything but friction. I read each slogan. I tried to understand orgasm using Miriam's Latin. No one said just listen to the Jacksons. No one ran reggae along my scars. Let the beat tar my throat. Oh, son, To let Lizzo widen your scope, to let tulips bastion or fall to swelter in harmony's grope is a spell I cast using uterus and severed rope. Yes, music is a kind of grass, foot lush, touch lashed, green ribbons, wet with smoke. Thank you. And yes, I look so much forward to all the other badass poets. Thank you.
Alexa, thank you so much. Those are wonderful. First of all, just the idea of I never thought about the perspective of the parents from Peter Pan. What the heck must they have thought happened? I'm sure it goes into it. I've never actually read the book. I've only, unfortunately seen the Disney version of it, but wow. And in both that and in your description of the hoarders, there was such a sense of the distance between the way something is for someone and the way they want it to be. And I think that's a really relatable sort of feeling. And then obviously, your work really captures femininity and I don't know quite how to say this. A different sense of self-ownership, or a desire to move towards a different sense of self-ownership in a really interesting way. So that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I think I don't know if the links to your stuff went in the chat already, or if I think Noli's going to paste those in right now. But yeah, there's a link for Bookshop and anything else. And you have your full-length collection's coming out in spring. Has there been any more specific date noted yet? Sorry. I forgot. We had a couple people, this is no offense to those people. When we have people who don't have full names or descriptions, we tend to turn on the don't let people unmute themselves. We've had problems with children playing loud noises into our Zoom meetings before. Anyway, go ahead, Alexa.
Yeah, no, I understand that. April 6th, it should be out.
Perfect.
Thanks, Ridge.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we're off to a wonderful start, and I think we will keep going in a good direction. That's my personal belief. I'm putting it out there. Tonight's gonna be good. All right. Our next reader tonight is Angelique Zobitz. She is the author of the chapbook Love Letters to the Revolution from American Poetry Journal. She's a 2020 Pushcart Prize nominee, Spring 2019 Black River Chapbook Competition finalist, 2020's Best New Poets nominee, and a 5-time Best of the Net nominee. Her work appears in the Journal, Sugar House Review, Obsidian, Literature and Arts of the African Diaspora, Yemasse, I think, if it's named after the town in South Carolina. Okay. The Adirondack Review, and many others. So without any more from me, Angelique, you should be able to unmute and you can.
All right. Hello, everyone. And Happy New Year to you. I'm very excited for us to ring in this new year with one another and starting off, I feel like on the right foot, being in communion with other artists and writers and poets. So thank you for spending this evening with me. Obviously, thank you as well to Ridge and Trina and Noli for the absolute phenomenal work you do and for enabling us to remain in communion through all of the turbulence of last year. And it's like boggles my mind that I'm saying last year. And this is a new year, and what you'll be doing for us this year as well. So as Ridge mentioned, my book, Love Letters to the Revolution, recently released in November, and it is my first. And I'll read primarily from it today. A lot of it, it is dedicated to my daughter. Her nickname is The Revolution. But it is about the relationships that we have as women and how that enables revolution. So I'll start with the first that from where it takes the book takes its name, Love Letter to the Revolution #1. And this is a cento. So each line has been taken from a Black woman poet, and I like to think of as my foremothers to come together to something new. Little sister, nobody spoke to me about the moon or how to fashion a world that will hold all the people. These stains and scars are mine. So I will give you thunder, shatter your hearts with rain, let snow soothe you, make your healing water clear, sweet, teach you to laugh and dance and sing and play and drink their wine and religion and success and outlast. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. And you are your mother's child. Be who you are and will be. Learn to cherish that boisterous Black angel that drives you. Picture the daylight, bringing her to woods full of birth moons. There you are. And so this next one, thanks, is in the kind of same vein of magic and, history and forward progress as well. And this one is called Mame Kuombo Bang Speaks to the Revolution. And Mame Kuombo Bang is a Senegalese goddess. She was here before religion, like before Islam, before Christianity. And so here we go. You were born from legend, dear child. The fishermen learned of us first, before plunder, before thirst, before baptism, before suckling at breast. There was me and you nestled in me. Formed first from salt and undertow, in my watery womb, you a caviar in my flashy belly, born in the sweet mouth of the river. You walked on water before men, you fish and loaves, called for offerings, given milk in droves. The sailors, travelers, foreigners learned to behave with gratitude, else risk drowning. There was no God with dominion that made us goddess, who choose what you will accept. Seek not oblivion or rest. Stop waiting only to walk the night as deceptive and dangerous as the river ready to take more than you need. All right, this third selection is after Patricia Smith, and it is called Till It Moves Like a Slow Song Sounds. It is a golden shovel. So each line, end word of each line will utilize the title, the words of the title, Till It Moves Like a Slow Song Sounds. Friday. My great auntie used to hold me till police sirens crept down the street. We'd feel it go silent, quiet, thrumming in alleyways. Her rough hand moves up and down and across my back from nape to blade like cat foot smooth steppers at the lounge, clasping hands in a prayer of what we find holy. Al Green crooning slow molasses rhythm, soul communion, skin to skin, carrying a song as she crafted love out of terror sounds. Saturday. For every stovetop press and curl, Joyce held my head still. Friday night liquor fumes wafting near my nose. Sometimes she'd hit my ear. I'd flinch at the hot comb sizzle. How fast my straight back moves in that vinyl covered seat. She'd tap my shoulder with her hand still silent, like we both learned to not say I'm sorry when others hurt us in a roundabout way, watching her ex-husband walk late and slow through through the door, no hurry to pick up the boys she raised, while a song testifying of what can and cannot be changed sounds. Sunday. After Mass, I'd lean into the padded kneeler, hand clasped till I'd run out of adolescent prayers of intercession, candle lit under the rafters, incense and taper flame, relief and moves, Holy Spirit glow over my slick blue magic sheen scalp. Like every Black saint framed in stained glass above gave benediction, a largismo duet, communion of past and present, as easy as slow sanctification, soft affection back for every prayer in their names, song as sweet as altar wine, and praise and glory without making sounds. Then this last one here, it's called Small Gifts, and it's in 3 parts as well. While the previous one kind of touched on my being raised Catholic, this one pulls in some things from a brief foray into the Pentecostal church. Very interesting. Small gifts. 1, baptism. At 12, I left home, began by packing my trunks, putting away the things I did not need, the copper-colored Barbie dolls, the burlap bag full of half-threaded bobbins, my mother's hopes and dreams, the once jagged rock that cut a ragged seam in my back, whose edges I had rubbed smooth. I was brought to a brick house bathed in shadow, seeking protection. I coated my skin in cocoa butter, braided my coarse curls back into a crown of nappy ropes, crossed myself 3 times, and checked my empty pockets for locks of my hair I meant to burn so the crows could not build a nest and drive me crazy. A packet of salt I stole from the diner. Should someone brush my feet with a broom. Only in hunger did I eat the bread loaf ends, but my purse stayed off the floor. In the Pentecostal church, another superstition. They dunk you 2 times in baptism waters. Assurance, if the first immersion in the Spirit does not take, accidents happen and you still swallow him whole. 2, salvation. I read today that the 4th of July was once a Black holiday. After the Civil War, the defeated Confederates, those traitors, closeted themselves inside their homes and could not muster the concern to celebrate liberation from tyranny. They lost love for their country, so fluxumed by the notion of independence for us darkies. Freed Blacks, though, held massive parades to celebrate the promise of a nation made good. We met in the public square, the town halls, arms open wide, whole families lined the streets, could recite in syncopation the Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the 13th Amendment. The lovers danced the toodle-oo until their heels hurt from pounding out their joy, free to link arms, love in daylight, raise their own children, to believe briefly they were saved. 3, tongues. I prepared to receive the message in tongues, tangled mine with twine to throttle its tumult, held its haunt, stilled its flaunt, flick, flitter, float, and finesse. I said, be still and listen, tongue. Lord, I heard you say, where 2 are gathered in my name, there I am. So I gathered them to my lips, to my kiss, to suckle at each breast, each syllable undulating off the tongue, individual stroke of heat and sleek muscle, rippled in adoration, twined as a conduit for language. I sought communion, glorified your name, exaltation, come, Savior, your name on my tongue, as soft and salt laden as butter pecan ice cream, sipped from your own mouth. Thank you.
All right, Angelique, thank you so much. Those were wonderful. It strikes me as really interesting. There's always this difference in experience between reading poetry on a page and hearing it read by the person who wrote it. And that what makes that really interesting, I think, is that you use these specific forms that, had you just read them, maybe necessarily wouldn't have known, but especially the oh, I'm blanking on the whole title, but the slow song one, I was almost looking out for these words as signposts, and it does make me focus really differently on things. And Trina just said in the chat, I always appreciate liner notes from poets, and it's true. Like, I like when people tell us, why this was inspired this way or why this came out this way. But that last piece that you read, so interesting and so filled with like a spiritual longing at times, and I think it's a really relatable feeling, especially for not to speak for everyone who's artistic or anything, but some of us tend to be overthinkers, right? And it's real easy to talk yourself into and out of a faith in like one afternoon without meaning to. And I think also just that the wonderful thing about some forms of spiritual, whether you call it worship or the communion, whatever you want to call it, community even, is that it is such a visceral, physical experience. And that is something that, for the most part, American Christianity doesn't like to talk about. So I think your last words there really sort of like hammered home this, it can be this physical, sensual, full body experience. It doesn't just have to be people in tight shirts being mad at themselves or whatever. I can ask you to unmute. Now you mentioned, so not, you don't have to necessarily get into it, but you mentioned your daughter, who you call the Revolution, which is amazing. I'm hoping, and this is a real, like I said earlier, I make dad jokes even though I don't have kids. I'm hoping at some point she wants to be an actress so you can claim she won't be televised.
You know what? I may mention that to her. She is into the arts, so okay. that could be a pathway.
Yeah, but this is, I think this is something I've heard from a lot of people in general, is this idea of like how do we prepare our kids for the world as it exists right now and as it's likely to be. And I think one of the other things with 2020 obviously was sort of a hopeful spreading of awareness, or at least leaning towards some sort of reckoning with race relation or race issues in America. And I think the idea of calling your child the Revolution and like putting it in their head early, like, you're going to have the power to maybe do something about this, you're going to be able to, is just so empowering and so wonderful. And I love that sort of chain of your influences down to her. So that's really moving. And I would ask, is she I don't know how old she is, but is she do you talk to her about this stuff?
Yeah, we do. She's 8. We live in a town where we are very much the minority. We're in central Indiana. And in order for us to navigate our day to day and for her to love herself, we have to fill her up with so much, positivity, so many things about the world, and help her understand the things that she may encounter and how not to be diminished or feel diminished by those things. And she's had incidents already, in first grade where, we've had to deal with those type of things. And so this really was an attempt to harness this collective, beauty and strength and pass it along while still, pulling out those bittersweet things,
Yeah. And acknowledging the challenges that may be ahead, but not, It's very easy with anything. I obviously I cannot relate on that level, but I do know that it's very easy with most social issues for me to feel like I can't do anything about it. I'm just one person. But the idea of trying to balance that out with, yes, but one person can participate in doing something about it is such a nice thing. So I think that's really inspiring. And I think, I don't know. So your book came out in November, so I think Noli's going to put a link to it in the chat, and I suggest that everybody read it.
Well, thank you.
There's a link right there. Thank you, Angelique. Really, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me.
Sure. All right. Keep on moving. Our next reader. I'm taking a breath now because I often forget, and then halfway through a sentence, I feel like I'm going to fall down. Our next reader tonight is Michelle Bowdler. She is the Executive Director of Health and Wellness at Tufts University, and after graduating from the Harvard School of Public Health, has worked on social justice issues related to rape for over a decade. Is Rape a Crime is her first book. It was longlisted for the National Book Award. She is a recipient of a 2017 Barbara Deming Memorial Award and has been a fellow at Ragdale and MacDowell. Michelle's writing has been published in 2 anthologies, the New York Times, the Rumpus, and Brevity, among others, and her essays, Eventually You Tell Your Kids and Babelogue, were nominated for Pushcart Prizes. So, Michelle, you should be able to unmute now and
okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm really glad I didn't go first because I got to hear some beautiful writing, and I'm going to have to read from my book, so it's going to be I'm going to try not to just look down. I want to say that I was trying to choose between 2 pieces, and the themes coming up tonight seem to be related in a certain way. I was trying to choose between a piece where I was a young woman and describing a scene with my mother, or a scene where I was a mother and describing something that happened between me and my children. And for whatever reason, maybe because I haven't read it yet in any readings, I'm going to read the piece about me and my mother. And I wanted to say that my book is a memoir, but it's also a piece that, as it describes my own personal story of an assault during a home invasion, it also goes out into some researched material. And this particular piece is about the meaning of home and the apartment that I had to flee after this assault during this home invasion, and what it meant to be in community with my friends before this thing happened. So I think it's going to be long enough that I'll just be able to do this one reading. And so that is the background, that we're in our apartment, soon to be leaving. Okay. As I began to feel more solid and built a new home, that's with my new partner, and a new life, I thought back, remembering the pride my former roommates and I had before we fled our apartment in Allston. That apartment held dear and important memories of our development as independent young adults. We wanted to share our joy with family members we'd previously been dependent on, and invited all of our mothers and grandmothers for Mother's Day. Sounds good. I'm in, I said, when Lise first brought up the idea, not sure my mom would feel like she had the money to fly. Still, it had been a year since we'd seen each other, and I knew she was curious about the apartment. What's the place like? Do the windows lock? She had asked when I first called to say we'd found a 4-bedroom apartment in Allston. My mother was often silent and would never have said she didn't like my choices, but I learned her signals over time. I no longer asked if she was hungry, for example, because she always said, "No, that's okay, not really," waiting for me to say when I was ready to eat. Her own preferences disappeared over many years at 1,000 little instances. I can't recall the one singular moment when she lost her voice. Maybe it started after my dad died. My mother was there with my sister and me in our collective grief, but I thought if I lifted my hand up to her, it might pass straight through her body, like I'd seen in a Casper the Friendly Ghost episode. She didn't get mad or sad anymore as far as we could tell. She just hung out with whomever she was with, content to be in their presence, but so achingly quiet. I missed her terribly, mostly when she was right in front of me. She reminded me of John Singer in The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, one of my favorite books. Almost every character reveres the deaf-mute man and feels understood by him. Since he doesn't talk during the one-way conversations others have with him, he is exactly who they need him to be in his silence. Ultimately, though, his loneliness and alienation are revealed. As to the Mother's Day invitation, I was almost certain my mother would say yes when I asked her to come, whether she could afford the ticket or not, so I fretted about asking her at all. I finally did, and the rest of my roommates asked their mothers, and within a week we had received a spate of affirmatives. You can stay with me, I told my mom. My family didn't believe in hotels if an alternative free space could be arranged. I had a full-sized futon. We would both fit. It might not be fancy or comfortable, but it would most certainly do. I looked around my bedroom, trying to see it through her eyes. There was the futon, whose cheap wooden frame could be pushed and pulled with effort to become a couch of sorts, a desk the previous owner had left behind, and a variety of milk crates. One served as my bedside table, and the others were stacked as a makeshift dresser. Best of all, there was a handwritten sign over my desk that my dear friend Lise had made for us that had made for me, that said, a room of one's own. I was the happiest I had ever been, living with my friends in that apartment. My mother flew in on a Friday afternoon. I unlocked the front door and made a sweeping gesture with my hand. Welcome to the Waldorf, I said, and she giggled. The night before, I had borrowed a second pillow from one of my roommates and washed my bed sheets at the laundromat down the block. I had no memory of when I had changed them last. I grabbed a photo album I borrowed from home during my last visit and led my mother into the kitchen. Let's look, I said. It contained pictures of me from high school that I'd wanted to show my friends. I was at least 20 pounds heavier then, with thick frame plastic glasses and short, curly black hair. I looked closer to 40 than barely 16. The sweater vest, pearls, and makeup in my senior year photo cemented the impression of me as a depressed Midwestern housewife. My current lesbian hipness was stunning by contrast. I was thin and muscular with a giant head of frizzy hair like Abby Hoffman's, depending how recently I'd washed it. I wanted to share these with my friends, show them the person I was back then, someone who longed to leave rural Ohio and who had an outward identity that didn't match how I felt inside. The album was covered with sun-worn green cloth. My mom and I sat side by side, staring together at one picture, showing my 3-year-old sister leaning into my mom with her upper body, my mom's arms fully occupied, with me as a tiny baby. She looked weary, her eyes at half-mast. If you had been born first, you would have been an only child, my mom said, as she sipped her Dunkin' Donuts coffee and looked down at the photo. A ray of sunlight came through the kitchen and caught the plastic sheet on the photo album just so, and my mother squinted. I jumped up to pull the shade down, afraid if she got up to find her sunglasses, the moment would pass. I pointed to the picture. You were saying? I leaned forward, my hand on my chin, with my finger crooked like a question mark. You cried nonstop. No matter what I did, you cried. I used to wake up in the morning and hear you screeching, and I'd start crying myself, thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to get through another day with her. I touched the cuff of her sweater. Maybe I had colic. Did you take me to the doctor? Babies cry. I wasn't going to bother the doctor with that. Well, if there was something wrong, he could have fixed it, and then you wouldn't have had to suffer so much, I said. Suffer? You and your sister are the best things that ever happened to me. Her eyes teared up as she skillfully took back what she just said. You've never given me anything but joy. Mother's Day weekend was a success. On the day of the brunch, we all crowded into the kitchen. The moms helped make the salad. There were cherry tomatoes to cut in half, cucumbers to slice, feta cheese to crumble. Lise made a 4-layer chocolate raspberry cake, and my mom frosted it with a double batch of homemade whipped cream. The pictures we took of that day sit in another photo album I now keep in a bookcase in our own living room. In one, Lisa's mother is smoking a cigarette while Lise stands behind her frowning. Julie stands in another, squeezed between her mother and grandmother, arms wrapped around them both. In all of the photos of my mother, she is laughing, her black eyes sparkling and her cheekbones stretched by her wide smile. I am captured in one photo as well, just staring at her, thrilled in that moment at her ability to laugh fully, enjoying my home and the memories I invited her to share with me in a city I chose to make my own. I don't notice the grime on the walls or the mismatched chairs in the pictures. I don't see the 3 worn tablecloths we used because we didn't have one that was big enough. All I see is the joy on our faces. We had hosted a fabulous time with 2 older generations graciously allowing their children and grandchildren to be the grown-ups in the space we created together. Our home, my home. There would only be one shared Mother's Day celebration in our apartment on Glenville Avenue. A little over a year later, it was broken into on that terrible night, and we scattered, leaving behind our memories, the fond ones along with the ones that devastated. Somehow, the green worn photo album found its way back to me. I have no memory of how. Someone must have grabbed it for me, and I carry that still. When I look at those photos from Mother's Day, I see a young girl who was brash and full of life. For years after my attack, I searched for her. The young girl I knew was still inside me somewhere, perhaps waylaid by circumstances, but in there nonetheless. I looked long and hard for the key that could unlock the sense of promise she once carried, and my gaze often fell upon the photos of our shared life in that apartment before. That young woman was vibrant, loud, and fearless. How could she really be gone before her adult life had barely begun? She and I worked hard to move forward, hoping together not to share the fate of John Singer or my mother, beloved, yet somehow unknown. It would take time to recalibrate, more than either of us could have imagined, but we were determined. We were determined to become one being again, to find a sense of home and place that no one else would ever again have the power to unmoor.
Michelle, thank you. That's incredibly powerful. I think there's so many layers to that too, of from your analysis of the small comments that a mother can make that's sort of throw you off your entire plan in a conversation, to to that sense of fracturing that comes with a traumatic experience, the actual sense of sort of loss and grief and strangeness. I've said this before regarding we've had a couple of women on the show who have been kind enough to share with us artistic works about abortion, and much like that, sexual assault is something that the numbers say happens to many people, many women, yet is sort of not discussed in a detailed and frank way about the experience that they can expect to have, the way it might affect people differently, all of these things. And I think having taking such a thoughtful approach, and at least in this essay, thinking about what it meant, sort of the idea of before and after, but also the idea of home itself, and that being something that maybe was hard to find again, I think is such an like, and it's just such a necessary thing, I think, because I mean, I obviously I don't have any experience like that. I do have some level of traumatic experiences in my life, and I could identify with many of the things in there myself. So I'm trying to think if I can formulate a coherent comment or question. I'm deeply impressed. I guess the question I would ask is, when you're working with something that's both this personal, and you mentioned it involves some research, I'm guessing, into statistics and how people cope with these things and things like that. Is there is it at all a balancing act? Do you like flip back and forth between like, this is what happens to everybody else and this is what happened to me? Or were you able to sort of integrate those two and kind of come to a greater understanding of your own experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. The book has about 150 endnotes. But what most people don't know is that I did the research for the book in the last 8 months and after the book had sold. It was a memoir, and both of the people who were interested in publishing the book said they would love to have me do a little bit of research. And so I started looking into some things that really did surprise me, like how over 50% of people have their home destabilized, in part because many people are assaulted in their home, and they leave, or they need to leave, whether they choose to or not. And the impact of that was powerful for me. That was something that I didn't know. I didn't know that so many people had work disruption, and that was something that was really something I struggled with for quite a long time. Educational disruption, financial disruption. And so how to weave that in gracefully and make one person's story larger was something that really was what my editing process was all about. And so if that was effective in this particular reading, I really appreciate you all saying so. Your comments are all very kind.
Yeah, no, definitely so. And I think, people's personal stories, particularly with difficult life experiences, or potentially, experiences that make people feel like their lives are over. The fact that there are people who have continued to have a life, that is a lot for a lot of people. But not only that, to have someone relay their experience and also point out, oh, and by the way, this is the common reaction to this. There is not anything wrong with you. This is
right
what happens when people go through something like this. That is such an important message as well. So
yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful. And the book is out now as well?
It came out in late July.
Okay, awesome. Well, there's a link in the chat, so everybody go. If you're interested in more, you should read up on that and follow Michelle on the relevant links. Thank you so much, Michelle. Really appreciate it. All right. Our final reader tonight is Amy Baskin. Amy Baskin's work can be found in Pyrene's Fountain, Friends Journal, and some other places. By the way, I like when people write bios in interesting ways. This is fun. She is a Pushcart Prize nominee, an Oregon Literary Arts Fellow, and Oregon Poetry Association Prize winner. When she's not writing, she matches international students at Lewis and Clark College with local residents to help them feel welcome and at home. Amy, you should be able to unmute.
Unmute.
There you go. Take it away.
Thank you, Ridge. Thank you all so much for having me here tonight. I want to specifically thank Deirdre Fagan for suggesting that I read here tonight, and for Noli taking her up on that suggestion. So it's a pleasure to be here, starting the new year off with all of you. And I can't believe the readings that I've heard tonight leading up to my final reading. And I don't think, I certainly wasn't aware of what people would be reading tonight, aside from reading the bios initially and getting somewhat of a sense, but everything really keens in a certain direction tonight, I'm seeing, and very moving one for me. I had hesitated trying to figure out what to read tonight. I had a lot of different ideas, things about the pandemic, things about reflecting on how to move forward through the new year, through this next leg of the pandemic, and in a hopeful way. And yet I kept gravitating to a collection that I'm actively shopping right now that I've been working on for quite some time. That's working title Night Hag. It's a collection of Lilith stories. And if you're familiar with the Lilith mythologies, she was the first woman, according to Hebrew myth, before Eve, and she was the one that was made at the same time by God, out of the same dirt as Adam at the same moment, and was banished from the garden and replaced with Eve by Adam's rib. Because she didn't want to be told how to have sex, and she liked being on top. She's also seen as a demon of abortion and a demon of a stealer of babies. And that fascinates me from a particular, like a personal perspective. So I thought, what if I wrote a series of poems in both mythological time and modern time with a persona of Lilith, looking at challenging notions of what life is, challenging notions of agency, and always challenging received narratives. And so with that, I will start and give you a sampling of what I've been working on. The first poem is entitled "The First Woman on First Love." What did we know of anything then? We were not there, and then we were. I don't remember not being. Do you? Before I saw my own, I saw your own, tender bud. I had no conception of you, of me. My eyes looked at your lips, your eyes looked at my breasts, my belly. Our hands reached out. With mirrored palms, we met each other's gaze, reflecting our hunger to know more about ourselves through each other. I shaped you with my own fresh hands so I could peg you. You mouthed me into mounds that gave you comfort, unconscious though we were. Other animals watched us and we watched them. We mouthed them too. We did take turns at first. I mounted you, you mounted me. We stopped to sleep and wander through the garden to feed. We put everything inside of us. What stayed down, we stomached again. What came up, we used to clean house, purgatives all, senna and castor. One day I wandered restless after sex had put you to sleep, but had left me unsatisfied. I found that tree and ate from it. That tree that God forgot, he later forbade it. When I returned, I looked upon you sleeping still and saw we were the same, yet all the same, different. I had tasted carnal seeds and knew to love does not mean to obey. You never understood this. My second poem is entitled A Wanted Child. Oh, thank you. A Wanted Child. When my belly rounded, gravid from the seed that Adam planted, and the blood that stopped restarted, and a head crowned and slid out, and my muscles cramped and ejected a frail facsimile of Adam, I knew that God had had a hand in this. God had pulled the kill switch, and I knew that if he could, I could find that switch as well. Somewhere in God's creation lies that lever to shut off my machinery. And though at first I felt disconsolate, in time I didn't miss carriage within me wherever I went. Instead, release of an unburdening. If God could do this to me and my child, then my child, so could I. Oh, thank you. third poem is entitled Night Hag, one of the many epithets for Lilith. You want to lie down with me again, but this time pressing my face into our mother's soil. I tell you no, and turn and sit up. Pouting and frowning, you say I always have my way. You whine too much. You come every time. When have I ever left you unsatisfied? Never. I am not your tool. Cooperate. Make an effort to help me enjoy this nightly act. Aren't you curious to learn it all? Give me your hand. I'll show you how to make me happy. What's that? You don't want to know? I'm yours? Yours only in the sense that you're mine as well, brother. Thank you. My next poem is entitled Lilith Weeds the Garden. Am I to understand that God created us in his own image of body, mind, and spirit, a venerable trinity that most will fail to recognize again and again? My body has churned up and spit out Adam's seed on its own time and again. This time, when I feel his child kick within me, I don't want it. My chest pounds, my head rears back. I will buck this, I will. Body ready? Be damned. My heart is not in this. Something about him, this connection our bodies forged, needs to be broken. This is a grooming, a healing. Next time I will glean the seeds of more appealing fruit. I will find the outing weed, make a poultice, swallow it, think no more of it, then tend to all I want to grow. Thank you. And this poem, this next one is entitled Lilith with the Long Hair. And I wrote it this summer. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I did not participate because we have immunocompromised family members, but all of my friends did. They were all at the Justice Center every night. And one of them told me that she was standing there with a pregnant woman when the woman was tear gassed. And so this is based on that woman, Lilith with the long hair. July 2020 in front of the Justice Center in Portland, Oregon. Belly round, mask on, I link arms with other mothers around the courthouse. Those vipers won't wreak venom. They value the unborn life inside of me with zealot fervor. My ripe, imagined body is their chosen vessel. They want me to carry this child, their child, to term. Shine laser lights through their visors, all armored up in there and peeking timidly through cut plywood den, the size of a speakeasy peephole. I wonder, what's stopping them from slithering out from their pit? Does my belly give them pause? Not the young ones, the untrained weak ones with the most dangerous bites. They spew poison. Now another mother squirts milk into my eyes. I will wait to see how well my baby births in the aftermath. Everyone blames me. I put this fetus at risk. They say I should have known better. They say all men are gods. I say all men are snakes. And my last poem tonight is, it's entitled Lilith's Daughter. Oh, thank you. I keep seeing hands. And I appreciate that, thank you. My final poem that I'll share with you tonight is entitled Lilith's Daughter. It's a modern imagining of Lilith when she's chosen to have her child. Lilith's daughter. Look, he told me to sit down, so I walked out of class. I don't care whether you call in my absence or not, I'm good. She drops her coat on the floor and she takes flight upstairs, shutting her door. Sit up, he would say to me. Now get down, on your knees. Wait till I'm done. I left that garden lifetimes ago. The girl is not his. Her shoulders curve into wings like her father's. Her skin takes on a jubilant sheen. I rub my knees. The imprint of tiny pebbles, still tender. the meat of my palms stained red from clay, and sit back on my couch, finish my coffee. Above me, my daughter sings, pen in hand, as she sketches a world that agrees with her. Thanks so much.
All right, Amy, thank you so much. Those were fantastic. I think
Thank you.
let me think about a few things.
I just have to say, while you're thinking, that I was really struck. I was in love with everything I heard tonight. Alexa, your poems, your persona poems on Mother Darling, and Lizzo's Juice, and Angelique, your daughter, and the Revolution, and your Golden Shovel in particular, really got to me. And of course, Michelle, your piece was intensely moving. So I just want to thank you all for that.
Agreed. And honestly, in terms of, I guess, whether it's a persona thing or a mythologically inspired thing or what, your work on Lilith as well, I think is, so the reason I'm thinking is I'm trying to think of how to say this. I delight in inversions of things. I really enjoy alternate versions of popular myths. I enjoy taking a look at the hypocrisy involved in certain rules and regulations within religions and thinking about the fact that maybe the other side was right. I'll I'll just leave it at that. And I think, I first became aware of Lilith as a concept when I was a kid in a fantasy novel by Piers Anthony. It's probably terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I can read it, but it was great at the time. And then I went to college, and I actually, because I was raised an atheist, I didn't understand it, so I actually became a religious studies major, and I found the whole Lilith Lamia thing absolutely fascinating.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This idea that she was the first draft, but what was essentially wrong with her was just that she didn't allow herself to be dominated the same way that all the animals do.
Right.
And,
imagine that.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting perspective to take. And I think also, with the other work we've heard tonight, it was perfectly on theme. I mean, this was a night about, I think, to some extent, the experience of women within the traditional structures, whether it be across power lines or anything else. And I think having myths that more support a free and honest and empowered exchange of goods, services, information, and decision making is very much preferable. That the poem about a pregnant woman at a protest really is heartbreaking as well, and I think such a perfect skewering, though, the idea that no, they really care about fetuses when they're being used for political purposes. Trina has unfortunately had to hear me talk at great length in car rides about my belief that if someone is pro-life and they haven't adopted a child, they are a absolute bastard and hypocrite. But yeah, I think said in that way that only poetry can, where it sneaks into the back of people's heads and makes them feel things they don't quite understand. And I think that's really much more the way to change people's minds than having myself, a large white man, yell at you, because we've tried that for like 2,000 years now, and it's just not working. So I just want to say
it has its allure, but it's not the only tool in the box.
Exactly. And unfortunately, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But
so
anyway.
I've heard.
Anyways, I think having other ways of getting people to the same point is really important. So I think, along with everybody's work, I am very excited for this collection whenever it finds wherever it is going to end up, because that's an absolutely
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that.
Sure. So Noli just posted a link to your social media stuff in the chat. If anyone, by the way, if anyone wants to assist any of the readers tonight with finding a home for their work, please feel free. I don't know.
I'd be ever so grateful.
Well,
I hadn't felt so bold as to ask, but boy, thanks. Bridge. Appreciate that.
Well,
That's a great plug.
this brings us to the sort of wrap up for a second, which is that as we open the doors at 7:30, we usually end around 9. It's about 9:10 right now. We will leave the room open until about 10 o'clock at least. If things are really cooking, maybe a little later, although Trina may go to bed. But, we leave things open, so if people want to network, respond to poets, writers, if you have questions you want to ask directly, you may feel free. I would just say for now, by way of wrapping it up, that thank you all for being here on the first day of 2021 with us. Thank you for coming and your attention and your people talk about us as creating community, and it's true. But without anyone else, it's a community of 3. It's just us 3 in a Zoom meeting. And we really, when we've done that, we just default to showing each other our pets. So it kind of, it does take other people to occupy this space and to hold this space for people. And to, honestly, one of the things I love about the audience that we tend to attract is people are very often just as vulnerable in their reactions as the writers themselves are in their reading. So I really do value that. With that said, if you want to find out more about us or just keep up with us, we are over at tgicast.com. That's the best place. This show and others will be up there in the archive when I have an afternoon to sit down and deal with that. You can also find out about upcoming shows. You can find the show on Twitter at TGIcast. You can find myself on Twitter at my name. You can find the show's creator, and I call her the spiritual backbone, Trina Thibodeau, on Twitter at Trina Tibbs, TREENATHIBS. And you can find the show's booker, scheduler, most organized member, best glasses haver, and all around wonderful person, Noli Reed, on Twitter at Noli Reed. You can also send her your recommendations for people you might like to hear on the show. This show has gotten off to whatever it is, 175 readers / we've had a couple of visual artists as well. And that has been solely due to friend recommendation. This started with people Trina knew, and then it was, hey, who's in your phone? Who's in your phone? Who's in your phone? And here we are with this wonderful group of people that we can reach out to if we need to. So everyone, thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording, and I'm going to, I can't say that on the recording, right? That's not my tagline. What's my tagline? We need to come up with something for me to say at the end of the show. I think for right now, I'll just say thank you and good night for now. I think Noli might be typing a tagline for me, though. Was that what you're doing? No, she's doing something else. All right. Good night, everybody. And I'll not end meeting. I'll hit end recording.